You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 339, The Mandalorian, Chapter 5, The Gunslinger. We couldn't think of a longer title, to be honest. So we are revisiting all of the Mandalorian episodes from Season 1 ahead of Season 2. And speaking of which, we got some great news today, some things that we're going to share and talk about Mandalorian Season 2. And to help me do that is going to be none other than Mr. Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome back to the show, sir. We had a nice little vacation there, mini vacay, if you would say, some would say. How you doing?
Doing well, man. And now it's all Mando all the time.
Yeah, it feels like
timing.
that. It's been all Mando for at least the last, 10 hours now, almost-ish?
Yeah, getting there.
We got there, yeah. I'm excited. There's some great stuff. Let's get into this. There's, I'm going to pop over something here. We had, that's not what I want to do. I want to do, I got to add this here. Hold on, sorry, guys. I've done this before, trust me. We've got some stuff. So Entertainment Weekly broke some news today. Now, the news was a little bit light. Granted, it wasn't that detailed. I think there's a lot of things that you could probably dig out of this if you wanted to and really dive into and speculate. And I actually want to do this. So here's the thing. First off, this is pure conjecture on my part, but I have a feeling we're going to get a trailer here very soon. Now that Disney's Mulan is out, now we've gotten the EW thing, right? They like to not step on each other's toes and try to build on momentum whenever they can. So my guess is we're going to get a trailer here pretty soon. And so I'd like to come back and really dig into this EW article, but I want to do that with the aid of a trailer and kind of start piecing some of this together. So I thought tonight, because we could turn a whole episode into the EW article, and we've done that before. In fact, we've done that many times. But I thought what we could do is maybe just touch on a couple things that stood out from you from the article that was released today. And then maybe look at the pictures because, pictures say 1,000 words. But for you, first off, what was something that just kind of one or two things that really stood out in the article as you read through it today?
Well, I think one is we got a great shot of the Mudhorse signet on the pauldron, which I thought was really cool. First time we've been able to really see it nice and clearly, I believe. Or that's what I'm going to go with, at least. But yeah, and I think there were a couple of things that confirmed the direction we thought the character maybe of Grief, where he was going. And we'll see that here in a comment that Carl Weather made. And man, we get with this little tease of Moff Gideon, like how does he actually play into the story? And trying to figure out what some of his drivers are, what's he actually doing? I mean, he seems like he's still fighting for the Empire of sorts, but just to give us some more, just something more that goes with that too, is exciting to get a little flavor of. But aside from that, it's kind of your stock publicity photos, I guess. They look good. Cara Dune looks okay-ish.
Yeah. No,
I didn't get a rise out of you? God. Man, you are distracted tonight.
There's a lot going on over here right now. No, I would agree. Like these pictures are exciting. Certainly, we'll step through each one of them here. I've got the first one up, but we'll talk about them in more detail. For me, I think there was there's technically three. Well, I shouldn't say technically, it's not technical. There were three things that stood out to me. The first one was about, Gideon's character. I think Desposito said something like, they were going to spend some one-on-one time together, he and the child. And that gets my mind going like, okay, well, hold on a second. How in the world is he getting one-on-one time with a child? That means either the Mandalorian has been, he's not in the picture in some way, right? He's either they've got him captured or something's happened to him in some way. But if Gideon has the child and he's doing one-on-one time, I mean, that can go a lot of different ways because we really don't know what his intent is. Right. We know the intent of people that are after him for bounties. And we've speculated to no end about, what they're trying to do with, from a science lab experiment and middies and cloning and all that stuff. But we don't know that that's any of that holds true with what Gideon wants in this. Right.
Right. We're still at a loss as to what his driver is on this.
Right. So he's spending time with him. That stood out. The idea that he said he would be going toe to toe with the Mandalorian. So I'm thinking, here we go again. We're getting the Darksaber. He's going to be wielding the Darksaber. Mando's going to be wielding all of his, arsenal of weapons. I'd love to see that fight. Hopefully we don't have to wait to the very end of the season. My guess is we probably won't if they're kind of spilling these things now. All right. Probably happens earlier on in the season, which would be great. And then the other thing, there was it's an off quote, and I'll dig into this a little bit later, but when we talk about the trailer and all, but it's from George. I think it's from Dave Filoni, and he was talking about how what he learned or what he I guess feels is that as long as they present a good story, that the fans are going to go with it, right? They'll buy it as long as it's a good story. And I'm not tooting my own horn, but I've said this time and time again on this show. I've got a lot of crazy thoughts in my head, a lot of ideas of how things I want to go, how I want them to go. But at the end of the day, it's like I said, as long as they're doing good stories and putting those out, I think by and large, the fans are going to like them, right? I mean, we are picky, but it's Star Wars and we love Star Wars.
Absolutely. I mean, we know the visuals are going to be there because the visuals have been there. And so, and like you said, we've continued to tout, and I think Star Wars fans in general feel this way. If you bring a good story to the table, they are going to find a way to execute it pretty well.
Yeah.
They've shown that they can execute things, they can execute things that are not all that great story-wise and still put something presentable on screen that's still entertaining and still has, some emotional gravitas to it and still gets us excited for, whatever it is that we're watching. And so if they've got the story nailed down, and we saw this with Clone Wars with Filoni, certain arcs, man, they were really, really good stuff. Some of them were really poignant. Some of them were really powerful. Some of them were just downright messed up. So we know when there's good writing that you can do a lot with that. And we know the visuals are going to be there in some respect. And the show hasn't proven, this episode, I think maybe shows a few little technical things that are a bit of an issue, but I think in general, the show as a whole has shown that they will bring the visual part of it as long as we get the story right.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a look at these and just kind of get some first impressions, I guess. And I mean, this is the three here. Obviously, Grief looks a little different.
Got the white goatee going.
Yeah, he's almost got that for sure. But then his wardrobe looks like his outfit looks very samurai-ish, right? They used to wear that same kind of an outfit with thing going across there. The two medallions usually representing the house that they belong to or some kind of other, symbol of some sort. So he's got that look going on, which goes hand in hand with, the wandering samurai thing that we get from like Lone Wolf and Cub. All right, let's see. Number 2, this is the picture we were talking about earlier. That he's like posing so that he can show off the symbol. I mean,
yeah. For those not watching the live stream, this is the second one's him, and the child is next to him, of course. But yeah, he's kind of sauntered up against the wall.
Yeah,
these are all publicity. These are all publicity photos, so they're all very staged. There's nothing candid. There's no screenshots from the episode or anything.
Right. There's Cara Dune.
Yeah. I care.
Here's an advertisement. We'll skip over that. There's Moff Gideon. Now, this one, I don't know. This could be a publicity. I think it is, but it does. I mean, it's hard to tell with this guy. He's such a great actor. You never know when he's, acting.
Well, with some of the background, this looks almost like it could be from the episode where they got him.
Yeah, and this is where
and would he really be in a publicity shoot? Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. He says he has access to all of this great technology at his fingertips, and he knows how to use it.
Yeah, curious. We know he's got resources. But I guess we're going to get a lot more of this character. And of course, we haven't even mentioned the Darksaber.
Yeah. I have not looked at this. Some of these are the first time for me looking at them. Speeder type, Mando takes a child for a ride on a speeder bike. Really?
Just going to the grocery store.
Let me go take the kid out on the chopper, take him around the block once or twice, get his hair in the wind, and let him feel alive. That's what Dad used to do with me. All right, here we got another advertisement.
Escalator for Matt the helmet.
Bantha tracks a Tuscan Raider on his mount. So
this is the one that threw me off. I mean, it's cool. We got we got a really detailed picture of a Bantha.
Bantha, yeah.
But why is this important? But I think, so the thing I took from this, though, Ira, was that we know we had, in this episode, actually, it's very, very fitting that we're going to do this episode.
Yep.
On Tatooine, we got a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yep.
So this definitely suggests that we're going back to Tatooine to resolve that storyline.
Yes.
Which, again, not surprising. Well, I guess it could be surprising if you don't do it in season 2. You could always come back to it really later on, but clearly we're going to get something on this story arc, which I'm very excited to see.
Yeah, and I think between this episode and the episode that we did on Cobb Vanth, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to know more about where our heads are, at least with where we could possibly be going with Tatooine, go check that episode out. There's a lot of good speculation there. I say good, but I'm biased. Let's see. This is so we got the last 2 pictures of the cover.
Right.
Oh, he's so cute.
At first, I thought this was the only cover, which I was going to be I was going to laugh about, the Mandalorian, and we get just the leg of the Mandalorian.
Oh, and something about his eyes, though. Like, though, I don't know if this was the doll. Is it a doll? It looks like a doll. His eyes look a little different. Hopefully that's, I don't know, maybe it's just more light coming through or something.
Yeah, it didn't really have the realism that we were kind of hoping. But God, we're going to talk about this episode eventually, people, I swear. But that was some of the issues I had with this episode too.
All right, well, here you go. This was the big one. I mean, this is my favorite cover. Not because just the Mandalorian's front and center, but he's got the baby here, and this tells me that maybe he's ditching the baby carrier.
That's right. And he's got the European man satchel.
European man satchel. And this is going to allow him, I think, that's going to give him more mobility, right? And I think that they did a good job of always accounting for that stinking stroller, being around. He had to constantly do this, and they kind of gave him some thing where he could, move it remotely. But now it's just like, boom, he's connected. He's got the baby carrier on, and they're way more mobile. So I think this will lend itself to hopefully more action and more mobility and not being constrained in that manner.
I guess they couldn't get any sponsorships from like Baby Bjorn or whatever it was.
I can see the marketing already.
I'm sure all the parents out there know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. There's one called Diaper Dude that I bought that was kind of like a man satchel. It had everything. It looked very similar. It wasn't this kind of sack-looking material, but the only thing that was missing on that thing was a place to stick the baby. And if it had that, I would have bought it 100%.
Could you imagine carrying around your kid in one of these?
Maybe. Depends on how old they are. But dogs, sure.
Would have been kind of awesome. Yeah, I could see the little toy dogs
sticking out of there. All right. Well, I promise we'll come back to this. We'll come back and do more speculation around episode 2, season 2 of The Mandalorian once we get a trailer. And again, I'm hoping that won't be much longer, but I guess we'll see. All right. You want to talk about the episode?
I guess. I mean, that's what we're here for. So that's what what the people are paying for with their time
and money. Literally sometimes. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to talk about, again, Chapter 5, The Gunslinger. And this episode was written and directed by Dave Filoni. It has a lot of guest stars in there. Amy Sedaris as Pelimoto, Jake Cannavale, as Toro Caligan. And he was a very interesting character. I think I heard a lot of different varying opinions about who he was and how he came across and all that. But we'll touch on that here in a minute. Ming-Na Wen as Fennec Shan, Steve Bloom as the voice operator of the spaceport operator, which I didn't catch the first several showings, and I don't remember if I wasn't looking for it, but the fact that he's in this is awesome. So for those of you unfamiliar with who he is the voice of a number of characters in Star Wars. Specifically, he was Zeb in Star Wars Rebels. Yeah, but he's done everything else too. I
love Ming-Na Wen.
Oh yeah, she's great.
She had a nice cameo in Milan too.
Did she?
Yeah, she's in a cameo there at the end.
I saw it, but I didn't see the ending. That maybe
she announces Mulan at the very end.
Very cool.
Anyway,
I'm glad they brought her back for that.
Yeah.
And then Mark Hamill as EV-99, so coming back into all of that as well. So
I always love it when Mark Hamill has a bit part in these as something random.
Yeah,
I mean, we saw it in Last Jedi, of course, but especially his voice talents are so awesome and just so dynamic. Yeah,
and half the time. It's what I love about it is like it'll be weeks, months before you get any hint from anybody that he was actually in it, which I think is really cool too. So I
always hate it when they did uncredited stuff. I mean, like James Earl Jones was uncredited for a long time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so it's kind of fun learning that. But it's like, come on, people, give us who it is that we like.
Yeah,
please.
Right. Maybe they do that because they don't want him to steal anything, right? I don't know. It seems like it would benefit the episode to just announce that, hey, you're going to get, Mark Hamill's got a guest cameo voice in this somewhere.
Well, I get it for these tiny bit parts. I understand that a little bit better than I do the voice of Darth Vader not being on there for a while.
Yep. And so before we get into the on-screen stuff, I think just one question I want to put out there, this was a very, very heavy episode in terms of Easter eggs, and specifically around episode 4. I mean, there's tons and tons of things in here. From when you're going back to Tatooine, and some of it's kind of like, well, if you're going to Tatooine, you're going to have to see this, right? Or you might as well just show this because we're all kind of expecting it. But then there were other things that maybe weren't as significant that we saw in here. But, as much grief as some of the sequel trilogy movies got for being too close to the original trilogy or being too in your face with some of the Easter eggs, this seems very unapologetic that as far as how Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau went about presenting Tatooine again for you. Any harm in that at all?
No, I think it was still done rather tastefully, and I think some of it was shot for shot. So we haven't really specified it, but Dave Filoni directed this episode as well, which is, you can kind of see it's a bit rough in some spots, in my opinion. I'm not an expert on any of this, but it seems a bit rough. But yeah, some of these were like when they go into the cantina. I mean, I'm pretty sure we had some kind of shot for shot type of mimicking going on. And of course, Toro with his feet up on the table at the table where Han and Greedo had their exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is just very, very on the nose.
Yes.
That I have more. I like when the shots are kind of imitating the source material. I don't necessarily like it whenever I have a character we are trying to portray this character like Han Solo. Right. And really be so specific about it.
Yeah.
That's the part that I think took me out of it. I was really cool with the shots, and being able to say, yeah, this is cool. This is what it's doing, what they're trying to attempt. But the other ones where they just put it too in your face. I mean, that's where we tend to kind of roll our eyes a little bit.
Yeah. And there are a lot of them. I think, I can't remember, at one point I was going to, when I was putting the show notes together, I thought, well, I'll just list these all out. At the very end, we'll talk about all the shot for shot stuff. And it became like such a long, exhaustive list. And I was like, okay, well, this is like 15 minutes of the show alone.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, there are tons of them in there. We won't get into all of them, but like the one, I guess, more than anything, and I think I did include this in the show notes, the one that stood out for me was the Mandalorian on top of the dewback. When he's at the very end, he churns, and we get that iconic shot that we grew up with in the storybooks, and it was one of the publicity shots that was released, and all that. Yeah. I mean, if you know what I'm talking about, it's a stormtrooper sitting on the dewback. But that to me was just like, oh, I mean, that's, again, you could call it fan service, you can call it an homage, whatever you want to call it. It resonated with me because that's just one of those great shots that I love, and it tells me that the people that are behind this really know Star Wars and they appreciate Star Wars and they want to include that stuff. And it's in your face, but is it really that distracting? I mean, if you hadn't seen that shot before, you wouldn't know any different. I mean, it seems like it fits in there just well. But then there are a lot of other ones. There's flyby shots that are shot, frame by frame, the walking into the cantina. I mean, it's just a ton of stuff that Filoni wanted to do to mirror what we saw in episode 4 or in some of the other movies themselves. So,
right. Of course, I was more enraptured in, we see the stormtrooper helmets on pikes, clearly worse for wear. And also the cantina itself is just completely empty for the most part.
Yeah.
So very stark contrast from what we had in episode 4 when we were last in this environment specifically, at least.
Yeah. And let's get into we'll get into the Tatooine in a second, because I do have that as a talking point, but it starts off with this space battle, right? And we know that there's some bounty hunter that's going after him. I mean, it's a pretty intense battle. I think it's right up there in terms of what we would expect from Star Wars, especially from a TV show or the Clone Wars. The practical effects here were awesome. Like, yeah. And it's throughout. Like, make no mistake about it. Like, I guarantee you, if hardly anything was ever CG in that opening sequence, it felt like it was all practical effects. It felt like it was a lot of what we had from like episode 4 and the space battles and the cockpit views and stuff like that. And credit to them, I think it really works. I mean, I thought it was great. I really liked this quick space battle they had.
I liked the battle. I didn't really care for the acting. And I really didn't care for the writing either in a couple. So what the visual I had we'll be critical here for a moment. Because we haven't had a lot to be really super critical about. But this is the kind of the first time where we actually have something like, okay, this is something to talk about. Mm-hmm. This character who was chasing the Mandalorian, I was getting visuals of Randy Quaid in Independence Day. I'm not even joking. You
go there, man. Come on,
dude. I mean, it was. You talk about like things that are kind of spot on.
Yeah.
Like the whatever the air piece is called, hanging off to the side and all of that, and the silly one-liners. I mean, and then the exchange of I can bring you in warm or cold. That's my. I mean, come on. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is where the writing
was it the writing, or do you think it was the delivery, combination of the both?
I think the writing was generally okay until that line. It was the acting that I had kind of an issue. This guy was a bit over the top, for me. And but again, I thought the effects were really cool, but it was just it just didn't jive, or it just didn't all mesh well for me to where it made the scene kind of more holistic and complete, where it could have been more exciting, But I like the idea of him being chased, and the other people are on him. It kind of regrounds us and brings us back that he is on the run, and people do have a way of locating him, and he's not safe anywhere, and he can't really settle down anywhere. So I really like that aspect of it. That's how we started the episode after leaving the safe confines of the planet we were just on.
Yeah. Well, we know for whatever reason, Well, we know the reasons, I guess. We don't know the end reasons or the end results of those reasons, but they had to get to Tatooine some way, right?
Right.
So this, you could argue that this didn't have to be in there. They probably could have found other different ways to get to Tatooine in some way. But let's focus on the dialogue between the two, because there is one thing, and again, you know me, I probably read way too much into this stuff, and I get scrutinized for it. But he says, hand over the child. He tells that to Mandalorian, hand over the child. Now, prior to this, even the Mandalorian, when he received his puck, he didn't know what this thing was, right? All he had was an age. It was very obscure. And I always kind of assumed that was everybody. So the fact that he knows that this is a child, do you think that's just because word has gotten out that there is a child? Or do you think this is that, he's had a run-in before? He's well aware of what the bounty is. But he speaks to him as two things. One, to me, he knows that this is a child one way or the other. That it literally is a child. And two, he talks to him almost like he's known Mando before. Like they've maybe had bounties, the same bounties, or worked together in some way. But it seems like they almost had a frenemy relationship in some regard in the past.
Right.
Maybe, yes, no?
No, I agree with you. It sounds like there's definitely a history there at the very least. And it seems like the guild, I'm assuming these are all guild people too. I mean, that would make sense, right? They have the fobs. But you would assume that they all have an idea who each other are. Mm-hmm. And it seems like everybody would know the Mandalorian anyway, even if they haven't had a direct dealing with him. And yeah, I think the news of the child probably spread very, very quickly, because remember, a lot of people saw it. I mean, a lot of people saw it, when they were trying to escape.
Yeah.
Yeah. So news travels really, really quickly, especially when they activate everyone's. And I'm sure the bounty has gone through the roof on this thing.
Sure. Absolutely. And it's probably doubled now, because it's not only just the child, but it's the Mandalorian as well. And so on that note, I have another question here. So the bounty that he had, any speculation, any thoughts around whether this bounty was strictly for the child? Do you think it was for the Mando? Do you think it was both? And then on top of that, he seems to be telling him, hey, Mando, pull over, give up, that kind of thing. But yet he's also going in and he's trying to kill him. And that speaks to that I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold. But
right.
if he's bringing him in cold, then does he have the same bounty that was offered to IG-11 as well, where it didn't matter if it was alive or dead? And then this is where Albert starts going, okay, well, if he blows this thing into bits, how does he have any proof at this point that, I don't know,
maybe the fob stops working finally?
There you go. We'll go with that.
That's what it takes to do it. Just obliterate everything in sight.
Maybe.
Even then, it probably still beeps.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
The question was whether or not the bounty was for one, the other, both.
I think at this point, there's probably two. It wouldn't surprise me if there were two. One for the child and then one for him specifically. Yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me if the guild took out the one on him. And then somebody else is funding the child. I mean, it's hard to say, but I think that sounds reasonable. I think that actually probably sounds likely, to be the case in this. And, but I'm with you. It's this whole killing the kid versus bringing him alive, him or her, whatever it is. And it just there's a disconnect there for me. It was a disconnect with IG-11. There's a disconnect a bit with this. Now, I don't think he actually had the intent to kill. It seemed like he was disabling. I mean, he was clearly in the position of, in control of the situation.
He had the high ground.
He did. I mean, until he pulled the Top Gun move, the Maverick move in the back.
Maverick move, yeah.
Again, I rolled my eyes at that one. I know
hit the brakes, he's going to fly right by me.
I know. I had to explain the reference, though, to someone.
Oh, did you? Unless you've seen that movie or you're a Top Gun fan, probably not catching it.
1985 was a long time ago.
It was 84, I think, actually. But
was it?
I don't know. I could be wrong.
I hate being wrong. Anyway, yeah. But again, it's just the whole killing versus disabling. I still think he was probably disabling and he was just threatening, And to be honest with you, it seemed like maybe he was using the line to kind of taunt, the Mandalorian a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Well, I got an existential question for you. And it's the question of why Tatooine? No, I'm kidding. No, it is an existential question. Why not Tatooine? There you go. That's an even better question. But so, I mean, we get, and this speaks to the time. Look, so let's segue into, or I guess, I don't know, what's the backwards segue? We're going to back segue into the picture of the Tauntaun in the
digression.
There you go. We're going to digress here. But the picture of the Tuscan Raider riding the Bantha, right? It asks us, it begs the question, why Tatooine? We know, well, I mean, we're going to get to some answers here in a little bit, right? With Fennec Shan and this mysterious figure and everything, right? But it didn't have to be Tatooine. This could have been any planet whatsoever. Partly could have been fan service. Partly could have been Dave Filoni wanting to go back to Tatooine and just say, look, here's another thing that's all centered around this planet that we all thought was really, not favorable, as Luke would probably call it. But any thoughts as to why they had to go back there? Is that yet to be played out or to be seen?
I think it's more the latter part, because I really don't want to have to admit that it's fan service. I mean, I really hope it's not. It kind of feels like it's fan service. It would make sense that, it's a backwater planet as far as ones that he would find. But again, he wasn't able to go anywhere else. So it's just, how is it dumb luck that Tatooine ends up being the center of so many of our stories at the very least. So I don't mind it though. I don't mind. And Brick Public's, saying the same kind of thing. It's a classic planet. I don't blame them for going back. And I think that's a fair point, where it is iconic. They did it in a way that is different than the Tatooine that we've known. And specifically, it's a different Mos Eisley than we know.
Yeah.
And again, we got to venture out of that a bit into the sand dunes and things like that, and get a different flavor for the Tuscans too, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But so I think at least it was different. I mean, we didn't get the same thing. We didn't get a complete play-by-play or a replay-by-play.
Yeah.
So we did get a little bit of a variation. We were able to see how this place has changed since I guess really since the original trilogy, less so sequel trilogy. I know we were there for sequel, but that doesn't really count. Kind of like the Gundark thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. Star Wars references.
Star Wars references, yeah. They're all throughout this thing. So we get there on Tatooine, and we'll get to the city in itself here in just a second, but he goes and lands Donkey Bay 35 or whatever it was that he lands in. And we're introduced to Amy Sedaris' character, Peli Moto, I don't think they ever said her last name, and these pit droids, which I think this is where a lot of people have had problems, right? And I want to get your thoughts, and I can see it. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say this was, great timing. It was probably the timing. You could say it was the editing. You could say it was the dialogue, the writing itself, the direction, maybe the costume. Her hair was really kind of, a focal point for whatever reason, and it should not have been. The outfit was kind of like, I don't know, didn't seem Star Wars, seemed more like Aliens. And yet I don't really have a big grief with all of this, but there seemed to be a lot of chatter around all of those things. Did you have a problem with any of this stuff? I mean, even her line like, "Oh, you've seen a lot of carbon score in here," and that's like, "Oh, dang, I remember that. That's right out of It's just, I don't know. Was it too much, or did you feel like this was not a big, like a nothing burger, and there was, she's in there for a good reason later on?
Well, it was over the top. I think that's kind of where I went with it. The problems I had with this scene were, I think the acting was a bit rough. I think some of the visuals were a bit rough. Some of the, like, she just arbitrarily punched a bunch of keys. It's like DJ in Last Jedi, where hand just flies, but there's absolutely no articulation to what they're doing. And I don't like that at all. If you're going to act like you're doing something rather than just something random really fast, and just to show that you're good. But the problem I had with this in particular, though, was that the child was passed around and moved around so much that it really felt fake. It didn't, like, the graphical representation or the visual representation of the child with all of the moving of it around in this episode really showed the limits of what they were doing. Because I think more often than not, this was probably a practical doll or effect or whatever you like to call it. And it really showed. It really showed how not real it was. And this was really the first indicator that I had of what was to come in this episode about kind of the CGI aspect as well as just the visualization of it. And I don't want to be super critical of Dave Filoni because he did a good job, but I'm wondering if some of this is, I don't know if it's to lay at his feet or if it's just the way the episode played out, but it seemed to be a bit of a theme throughout this episode for me, where these visual aspects of it just weren't quite working. And then we were trying really hard for all of these, call outs, to references, to where it was almost at the expense of the rest of the episode, some of the story or the acting aspects of it. Yeah. And so I think when you were asking this question before about all of the Easter eggs, I think this is, okay, we tried so hard to do all that. Why didn't we spend a little of that effort on some of these things that maybe were a little rougher around the edges? But yeah, I didn't have a problem with the pit droids. Actually, I thought the pit droids were fine. But yeah, her kind of action or behaviors overall were a bit over the top, I think. Yeah. And again, like you said, carbon scoring and just kind of knowing what the problem was by looking at it, even clearly what she stated. I forgot what it was, but that's an internal problem. You can't see it from the outside. How'd you know it from the inside? I'm nitpicking, I guess, but you're listening to a Star Wars podcast, so you're welcome. But I mean, those were the things I kept picking up on. I was like, I just kept sighing a little bit. And Yeah. So it was just a little bit disappointing.
All right. Well, let's see if this gets better for you.
It does a little bit, actually.
Yeah. Well, and I think the pit droids, just to touch on them, not that we need to, but it seemed like the people that were really anti-pit droid were the people that were really anti-prequels. So, yeah, that's kind of expected. If you didn't like the prequels, you sure as heck didn't like the pit droids, and you didn't like Jar Jar Binks. So, bye-bye.
Actually, they were pretty tame in this one compared to the prequels.
Yeah, I mean, they were full on Three Stooges in episode 1, and that's kind of what he was going for. Shocker, right? He was playing on that. But yeah, they were a little bit more tame here, so they toned it down a little bit. Let's talk about Tatooine, because we've been kind of beating around the bush on this for a while now. But we get a very different Tatooine. It is not the. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a scum and villainy of the earth are found here. They're probably not, and they're very few and far between at these days. And you can tell just by, I mean, the streets when you now I'm comparing this to the special edition Tatooine and not the original, because in the original you see the same characters walking in the background. With special edition, they blew this thing up, and that's what he wanted. He wanted this to be a huge, bustling town, a lot of traffic, a lot of people kind of touching and going, scum and villainy, all that. And then we get to this, and it's pretty desolate. And this is obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but this is more fallout from the Empire, right? The Empire is gone. There's really no reason. They probably don't have a true Empire presence now outside of what we see here on Tatooine. But what is in it for anybody on Tatooine now, right? Jabba the Hutt's gone as well, right? Exactly. So that's factored in. Who really goes here? There's nothing for anyone for the most part, at this point. And then we see the cantina itself. And again, this is a complete 360. There's nobody in there. It's now run by droids when droids weren't even allowed to be in there in the first place, and et cetera. But
irony.
Yeah, it's really great. And I think the other thing, and you touched on this, is when we saw the trailer, like visually, those helmets on the pikes, or those coming in, I think that's a really powerful statement. I mean, whoever put those up said, "You're not wanted here, right? The Empire is no longer wanted. This is what can happen to you. Historically, there are a ton. I mean, you can think about all the instances in our own history where people have beheaded other people and stuck them on pikes and put them as warning signs that, ye not enter, because this is what's going to happen to you." So I love the visuals of that too. I mean, it is kind of eerie to think that the Empire has fallen so far that people are literally just putting these helmets on spikes, and for all we know, there are probably heads in there. They just decompose and rotted out.
Right. And this is probably something we could dedicate a lot more time to was, like you said, there's no Jabba, there's no Empire. I don't know why the Empire cared about Tatooine in the first place, except as kind of a smuggler trade type of route.
I thought it was only just to keep Jabba in check, or to make sure that, he didn't get too far out. Let him have his planet, but have your, keep your enemies closer kind of thing. But
right. Yeah. Yeah. With the Hutt cartel and all of that. That's a good point, actually. But yeah, I mean, so why, with all of those factions gone, why are we now not a greater hive of scum and villainy than we were before? To me, it seems like it had the adverse reaction. There was less restriction. So all of a sudden it's less busy, or less vital, less important. And maybe because most people were there because of work for Jabba. I mean, maybe that thinking through that might be pretty plausible, right? I'm sure he had a lot of people in employ. We know some of the characters that were there in the original canteen, of course. Right. So it's so maybe that's more what it is. Of there's just not as much work there anymore because the cartel is disassembled, or it's gone with Jabba's death. Empire's completely fallen apart. Maybe there's other ways to smuggle things around. You don't have to go to these kind of backwater planets to find pilots and whatever else they're doing. Hide out for a little while.
Yeah. The right. So, and there's no band. That was kind of weird.
It was very quiet.
It was a very quiet place. Like, you want music, at least something going on in the background. Was there music at all?
I don't think so. I think it was
like, I don't think I've ever been in not that I don't travel around to bars, and certainly not these days, but even in my heyday, I couldn't think of you go in and you need that music to kind of cover up some of the ambient chatter and all of that. And there really wasn't anything on, but I can't see anybody, trying to do an under the table deal in the cantina when there's not a lot of people in it. And there's definitely no music going on in the background there. Yeah. So let's talk about Toro Caligan. Is that his name? I always screw his name up. Yeah.
I think so.
Toro Caligan. So who was he supposed to be? I mean, when I saw the episode at first, I'm like, what is this guy? He thinks he's Han Solo. And the more I thought about it, I guess the more I landed on, no, right or wrong, I'm not saying this is right. I landed on this was potentially somebody that had all the potential of Han Solo, right? Had the potential of being an anti-hero for, this series or in his own universe or whatever it is, he just made some really bad decisions and didn't learn from his mistakes like Han Solo did. He didn't have that street smartness that maybe Han Solo did. But again, another character that when he came out, there were a lot of people that took offense to, one, that he was sitting in the chair, two, that he had his feet up like him, right? This is all kind of in your face kind of thing. But I don't know that was really the intent here from Dave Filoni. Or was it?
I agree with you there. I think it was I think we were supposed to get the idea that this is what he is. But then very quickly, we realized the reality of it. And we realized that he's young. He's got no experience, really. He's just trying to find a way in. Somehow he has money. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, but we can talk about a couple of the good things, though. I mean, the costume for this character was spot on.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
And I think generally how he played the character, the actor, I can't remember who the actor was. I apologize. But generally, the Toro character was okay. I mean, it was a little over the top sometimes, but I think general, I mean, the visual of it and kind of the boisterous type of attitude and some of the decisions, like you were saying, we see him make throughout the episode are questionable. And you're right. He never really assumed that role, which I think was a good idea for Filoni of saying, okay, I'm going to show you this and it's in your face. You might not like it, but then very quickly we chip away at that to where there is no question he's not that character.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we don't even know if he can even approach anything that character because he's so unlike Han Solo in every which way. And again, he's trying to be a bounty hunter and some of these other things that, of course, don't quite jive in the same way. But I think there were some things that worked, and we'll talk about some of his decisions later on. But I thought that was okay, the way that Filoni framed that one up. And you're right, it was a little in your face, but when you kind of see all the other things, you're like, okay, I kind of get I get the symbolism they're trying to, a little bit of trade off here.
Yeah, and he was
still a little bit too much.
Yes, he was way over his head. I mean, he's got no experience whatsoever. He's chased what they call her an elite mercenary who kills for the top crime syndicates. Why on earth did this guy? He's not even in the guild, or maybe he's going. He's going for the money shot, right? All in. Mm-hmm. I'm going to roll my dice. But even still, he didn't have a plan. It just happened that the Mando walked in. He was trying to take advantage of that. But that probably speaks to his naiveness or his lack of immaturity or lack of maturity in terms of knowing who he is and where his limits are. And that certainly, I don't know. Maybe you could argue that's Han Solo to some extent. But again,
Han wasn't delusional though. I mean, Toro's delusional.
Yeah.
Han wasn't necessarily delusional. He just didn't care.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're running in the Death Star, running in, and what good is it if he gets himself killed? Right. That line is kind of what you're speaking to, and that's kind of what this guy is doing. But this is really just folly. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever that he would go about this. And
what's funny is I have a quote from Indiana Jones from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Where Harrison Ford Indy says, "I don't know, I'm making this up as I go
along." Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of it.
Yeah.
I love when we can cross Indy and Star Wars.
Yeah, it's all the same thing to Harrison.
Yeah. They all look alike.
And again, so the Mandalorian, he proposes to have the Mandalorian help him, and at first he says no. Then he takes a job. Any thoughts as to why he would have such a? I mean, this is the second time it's happened. The first time was, for selfish reasons. But why did he take the job after? I mean, he didn't have to, right?
Yeah, I mean, he needed the credits, so we know that much. But yeah, I really don't. I tried to piece that together a little bit, and I thought I came to a conclusion on that, but I got to be honest, I don't think I did. But I mean, he needed the credits. He needed some way of doing it, and I think he has enough confidence to where he would be able to do it. But at the same time, I don't think the Mandalorian thought they were. I don't think he had any expectation of Toro living, to be honest with you. Like he'd be able to survive this, and he kind of laid it out for him like that too. Of we'll kind of be lucky if we survive a sniper at range,
right?
And you're basically a sitting duck in the middle of a dune.
Yes. Not a lot of cover, not a lot of good cover at that. And I don't know. I threw this question out there, but I mean, sometimes the most obvious answer is the right answer. And given that he asked Mark Hamill, hey, are there any bounties? And he's like, no, we don't do bounties in here anymore, right? And he's like, well, crap, that's not going to work out for me. I need money. Oh, look at this schmuck right here who's asking for help. Let me go help him. But even then, it's like, okay, so he knew the bounty, who the bounty was. My guess is he's run into her before. He knows her, maybe if not at least by reputation. So the fact that he was willing to go, I mean, the fact that he was still willing to go through with it, and at the same time, abandon the child and put him in the arms of somebody who doesn't even know when he's just bent over backwards and almost risked his own life to keep this child alive. Doesn't really jive with me, but I'm just gonna go with it. It's fine. I'm not gonna lose sleep over it. But all right.
I'm gonna go here. Is it a bit sexist? There's a trend developing where he trusts the kid with a woman, and
Not
I don't
a guy.
want to. I don't. Well, I mean, it makes sense to us, like biologically and historically and all that kind of stuff. But it just seems. I hope they're not painting some of the women in that light or that regard to where this is a thing where he, here, let me hand it off to the lady while I go and do all these things. I mean,
no, I don't think that.
I don't think any of it's intentional.
Yeah.
And again, nurturing and things like that are qualities in a lot of different people, but it just kind of came up. I was like, this is the second time he's done it, or that they've done this in an episode, and I hope that's not a trend.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust my kids with any particular gender. I have other qualifications that exceed gender, like
Absolutely.
intelligence, common sense,
Right.
right? All things you want for your child, right? Not whether it's male or female, but
Right. And this lady seemed a bit eccentric.
I mean, she's the last person I would like. You've been babysitting 3 droids? No, ma'am. Sorry. Thank you though. I appreciate the offer, but no.
I've seen how your kids behave.
Yeah, right. Sitting there smacking each other. Yeah, they haven't been eaten in days, I'm sure. All right, so they get on the speeder bikes and they head out through the Dune Sea. And there was this kind of cool little competition that was going on. This was kind of a very light moment, but I really enjoyed it. And it was almost like, again, it speaks to this Toro character and his, I don't know, what, his chest pounding. I don't know. It seemed like he was trying to get up in front of the Mandalorian get in front of him. And then they were just kind of going back and forth, vying for who was going to be in front. I don't know. There's not much to say there, but it was great. And it does lead into the Tuscan Raiders. And
if we can pause.
Sure, yeah.
I've got so many criticisms. This is, again, I think visually, this was one of the first times we saw the visual effects fall short. Like the back shots in particular of them going on the speeder. While it looked cool when they were up close and whatnot, when they were way at a distance and afar, the visual effects just fell short for me of where it actually took me out of the show a little bit. Now, granted, you and I are a bit more particular than maybe most people would be, but to me, there was just another example of where the visual effects of this episode continued to fall behind what we started to be accustomed to in the other episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say I didn't notice it, because I think if you go back and watch it and you have a scrutinous eye, you can definitely see where you're talking about, and it's almost like a spacing thing, like the proportions, right, of where the speeders are relative to the sand, and maybe it's some of that was masked on like Endor and other places we've seen speeder bikes because of trees, and you've got something else, but they're on basically a blank space, and I think some of that gets exposed a little bit more here. So to your point, I mean, it is noticeable, but yeah, I get it. The Tuscan Raiders. This was like probably my favorite moment. Well, hold on, let me think about the rest of the episode real quick. Maybe my favorite part of the episode, outside of the very ending where we get the mysterious figure. This was my favorite part because I did like this extra dimension that they added to the Tuscan Raiders. This idea that they, are territorial. We kind of knew that already, but this kind of solidifies it, right? And then they did some of this in the Clone Wars too. I'm not saying this is exclusive to the Mandalorian by any means, but that was one of the things. But then they gave them this extra dimension of them being able to kind of speak in sign language. And that would make sense, right? You wouldn't expect somebody to be able to speak full-on Tuscan Raider. It's not an easy language to speak, from what I have gathered over the years of my adventures. And so you would expect them to have some other way to kind of communicate with them, but it does beg a lot of questions. How does the Mandalorian know how to speak with him, first and foremost, right? And the other thing is them sneaking up. I think that was a lot of people were kind of giving some flack about, okay, well, how did they just walk up? That one I didn't take too much. What's that?
With the bantha in the background, I believe.
No, I think it was just them two. The bantha was way off in the distance. It was very similar to like episode 4. And I mean, call me out if I'm wrong here, but the way I remember it, the bantha was far in the far distance. The 2 sand people did pop up, but they were right there. To me, it was like, I don't know. I almost saw that as it's kind of, I'm trying to think of a good example of where they've done this in other movies before, where suddenly the thing just kind of like pops up right in front of you, and you don't need to have an explanation for it. And I know it seems kind of, ironic that it's coming from somebody like me, but I was okay with them not explaining. I like this mysterious aspect of the Tuscan Raiders. And what I credit all this to, and I will let you speak, I promise. What I credit all of this to is like the Native Americans, all right? And some of the tales that they used to tell of the Native Americans. They were territorial. They had their areas. They were not a hostile group of people. They were certainly, well, not all of them, but they were willing to work and barter and communicate and build alliances as long as, everybody was mutually respected in a lot of different ways. And that was the aspect of them. But then this also aspect of like them being able to like airwalk, right? Or silently walk and approach different things. There's like this mystic aura around the Sand People that we didn't really have before. And again, I could be reading too much into it, but I like that. I like that they're going there with the Sand People if that was indeed the actual intent.
I agree with you with the symbolism a bit. I think that is really cool. I like that there was the ability to communicate. I think that was really cool. It was interesting that it was sign language. Felt like more like base stealing signs, but I mean, it was good that you could actually have a way of doing it. I just didn't understand why they were just there though. Mm. And again, if you look at our exposure to the Sand People in the movies, we'll just stick to the movies. If you look at our exposure to the Sand People in the movies, it is very one-dimensional of sorts, right? Basically, well, Attack of the Clones may be a little bit different, but in Phantom Menace, they're taking pot shots at Anakin in the other podcast. That's spitting. We'll take shots at podcast. The other pod racers. Yeah. In A New Hope, we see them attacking Luke out of nowhere and being very aggressive. And so again, given the territorial nature of them and what we've seen, it was a little bit of surprise of why are they just standing there? Really no assertion at all. There's no aggression. There's no, hey, you're on my land. It was like a greeting party of sorts. But from what we've seen of the Tuscans and what we hear stories of, like even in Attack of the Clones, there's nothing to suggest that they're actually like this. Mm. I mean, you and I have seen a little bit of different things, but I think for most people, it would be like, what the hell are they just standing there for? Yeah. I mean, really, what are they doing there? And they write single file to hide their numbers. I mean, all these things come out. It's like, help me understand, Dave Filoni, what you're doing.
Maybe so. And again, I don't want to be apologetic here, but maybe okay. So if you're okay with the Mandalorian knowing how to communicate with them, maybe this isn't the first time he's been here. Maybe he has. I can't remember if he says it was the first time or not. But what if he's known? What if in his previous adventures he's created some kind of relationship, or he knows how to speak to them because of past experiences, or are there's some kind of global respect on the Tuscan Raiders part for Mandalorians, and when they see that, they're hesitant. Maybe they're kind of like, okay, we can't just come in and attack this guy, or we can't just take pot shots at these guys that are running races through our territories. Let's approach them. We know what they're capable of, and so they take a steady hand, and they're a little bit more cautious about it, and take a different approach and as a different tactic.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. I think that's a great point. Clearly, he knows more about them than anybody that we've seen on screen before. Yeah. Right. And knows how to communicate. And maybe Obi-Wan, there's a lot of suggestions that Obi-Wan knew a lot more. Some of that's not canon anymore, but yeah. So what I do like about this though, so I've been critical. Let me say the good thing I like. This is like the Jawas, right? We get a different perspective and view of the Jawas, of how they are in more day-to-day type of life. And we don't get as much of that with the Tuscans, but it was still just enough of a hint there that it's like, okay, these aren't quite the same. It's not quite the same story, or the people are not so synonymous with what we've been told and what we've seen. There's something different to them. And I liked that we got that with the Jawas, even though they're very much like we know, but we got to see a little more of their daily life. We got to see a little bit different side of them here. So I really do like that. But I think in general, I'll agree with you there that there's got to be some sort of understanding there for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Otherwise it doesn't, to your point, otherwise it doesn't add up.
Right.
And then we talked about the Mando on the dewback. There's a great line here. It says, and at that range, the Beskar held up. Wait, at that range, I don't own Beskar. And Mando looks over and goes, nope, which I thought was brilliant. I mean, yeah, like it's got its highs and lows in terms of the dialogue, but that was one of the better moments. And, they're sitting there, they're getting attacked. They're laying there on the sand. They're getting attacked from somebody up high on snipering them, that kind of thing. Can you imagine the anxiety that Anakin Skywalker would have knowing that he's in sand and someone has the high ground on him, attacking him from that far? Sorry, I've been waiting like 2 weeks to do that joke, and hopefully
he would have had a conniption.
Hopefully I landed it now. Okay,
you did. Nicely done. I mean, it took a long time for you to get there, but you got there.
It did take a lot longer than it needed to. Okay,
real quick. So real quick though. So Noah in the chat had a question there. I wonder if they ever interacted with Boba Fett. That is something interesting to think about. So thank you, Noah, for bringing that up, because that is really interesting. And Stephanie's bringing up some Tuscan Raider things that we saw in a certain point of view as well. So there is other material to suggest some different things here, but
yes,
but I do like the posing of the question if there was something with Boba Fett to where there was some maybe respect, like you were saying, and again that story. Anyway, I thought those were great points to make. Thank you.
yes, no, awesome, thank you guys, and go listen to the Cobb Vanth. Go listen to the Cobb Vanth episode if you've not heard that episode. I don't know what number it is. Somebody, if you could look it up, put it in the chat there. We'll call it out here. I forget now. But there in that episode, I don't remember if we touch on the Tuscan Raiders, but we do touch on the fact that, and this goes back to that question of why Tatooine. I think, and right, I'm just going to kind of get to this at the very end of the show. But if this really is going to be Boba Fett in season 2, you had to come back to Tatooine. Maybe you have to show that the Tuscan Raiders have some respect when they really shouldn't have to have any respect because somebody like Boba Fett has been there and that all looks the same to them. There's all these little things in there that I think are starting to kind of add up that we're definitely going to get him there in some way. But more on that here in just a little bit. So let's start getting close to the final ending here. So the sun goes down, you know, and their plan is just to kind of rush them, bum rush her in the middle of the night. Although I can't remember. No, she didn't have the heat vision stuff or the infravision stuff, but he did, right? But
she had something. Yeah, she had some sort of thing that. Oh, yeah.
I
guess
can't remember or not.
Naked eye.
It's but either way,
she was really far.
She was very, very
that's
far.
A hell of a scope.
Yes, because those speeder bikes move pretty quick, and they were on them for quite a while before they were able to dismount and get to her.
When you saw the distance when they're laying in the dune, I mean, it was not close at all.
Yeah. Takes a shot at Mando. Mando falls off. Toro reaches out there, gets up to her. He's about to lose until Mando shows up and kind of saves his butt at that point. And it's, you know, it says it's been a long time since I've ever seen one of your kind. So I don't know. Do you think? Well, I mean, what do you think she's ever? I mean, she talks about the events on Navarro, right? Yeah. I'm assuming that when that happened, when that all went down, like you said, not only did everybody's little beeper go off that the child was loose, but word probably spread pretty quickly, especially within the guild, that they had somebody that was, you know, violated the sin, which was going against their own kind and kind of breaking the bylaws and all that of the bounty hunter guild.
Right. But again, the impression we're given of her character, though, is that she is very much an assassin mercenary. Mm-hmm. There's no taking men alive for her. If you're a sniper, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You probably don't do a lot of up close stuff. Of course, she is very good at being manipulative, so maybe. But yeah, she seems to be an assassin pretty much through and through. I didn't think they said as much, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about that.
No, you're fine.
I think it's more of the same. I think it continues to support what we were talking about earlier, though. Yeah, that there's you know, everybody knows, word spreads fast. Everybody knows what happened on Navarro now, and
he's a wanted man,
right? But again, it's another character that's like that has seen the Mandalorians. It's like everybody knows who they are, and we kind of hear that same line or something of the sorts of that same line over and over and over. Is it getting a little thin for you? Even in episode 5, that I've, you know, her line about seeing, it has been a while since I've seen your kind, or just the comments about how they're not there anymore, or they're a rarity, or there's something special about them, or are the stories true? I mean, we're getting that in pretty much every episode. Even people in backwater planets with no exposure to the rest of the universe know about them. Yeah. So it's just a general question. Sorry, it's kind of off script, but is this wearing thin for you by episode 5?
I'm fine with it. No, probably not in episode 5. And I would say even and I'd have to think about whether or not this comes up again. And I get your point. I'd be okay with it throughout all the rest of season 1. Like, I don't think I ever took issue with it. Now, if we come back to season 2 and we're still seeing it, I mean, but you could argue that, you know, they can go, there's a million planets in the universe and they could go to another planet and they have no exposure to what's really happened, and they just know that the Mandalorians are legendary, and they don't see many of them, so they would make that same comment. But I think what they're really trying to do is just really kind of set the stage for, you know, the Mandalorians were something more for the people that didn't. So you got to remember, I'm going to assume that a lot of people that are watching the Mandalorian did not watch the Clone Wars. If you watched the Clone Wars and you watched Star Wars Rebels, the Mandalorians they're very common. Right, they're not this mystical creature or being or character that a lot of people think them to be. If all you've seen are the movies and all you know is Boba Fett and Jango Fett, we've only seen 2 of those ever, and you know nothing about their culture, nothing about where they came from. then yeah, I think you kind of have to hit that point home with the general audience and let them know that, hey, these guys were a big deal. They were a big deal. They were a big deal. They're no longer around. Do that for season 1, set that, and then I think you're done. I think you move on from that point. And you said, okay, we've done that. We've established it. They get it. We've got everybody up to speed and caught up on who the Mandalorians were, or who they used to be at some point. But I think that's probably why they kind of did that in season 1 as much as they did.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And Dale in the chats, everyone's heard of them, but no one's ever seen them. Kind of like the Jedi and the Force. I think that's kind of a fair comment as well. And again, even the ones that knew Boba Fett probably didn't know a whole lot about it, and they've not seen one in a while.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was just curious if it was.
No, it's
been pretty repetitive, each one of these episodes. But I agree with you. I have to remember we have a general audience that's needs to be reminded, or kind of have it hit home a little bit. That they are really well known, and they're just not very visible anymore.
So the very end of this, before everything kind of comes to a halt, is they've got to come up with a plan. They're down one speeder because she took out one of them as they were doing their bum rush. They think about the dewback, and so Mando says he's going to go grab the dewback, which takes forever. My goodness, like I wanted them to run faster. Maybe they don't. Maybe you get just a lot of longevity from those things out in the desert. But anyways, he goes out and gets the dewback, and while that's going on, Fennec has an opportunity here to kind of really start getting into the head of Toro, which she does, and she tries to manipulate him. She says there's still time that she can go take him to who she's working with on Mos Espa, which was a callback to episode 1. We hadn't really talked a lot about episode 1, but I guess the question was with who. Like, she mentions there's somebody there that she was supposed to meet up with on Mos Espa. Do you think it's somebody like Gideon? Do you think it's like somebody that's maybe another interested party, what is it? Not the client. Is it the client? What's the guy's, whatever his name is. Is it somebody like that, or any thoughts or speculation onto who she was going to rendezvous with on Mos Espa? Is it Boba Fett?
Well, I don't know about that. Well, I think it's possible, but I think it's also one of these, this person I know knows what's going on, but I tried not to read too much into that one because it's just way too vague for us to understand who it would be. And maybe it's, Gideon. That would seem a bit on the nose, because if she didn't show up, whoever is at the end of the episode seems to be the one that she was supposed to meet up with. At least, why else would anybody be looking around unless they were just kind of watching the whole thing play out? Mm-hmm. But yeah, and then of course we don't think that was Gideon at all. So I don't know. Well, I have no idea.
Okay, so hold that thought, because we'll come back to that, because there are some things that make me think, okay, maybe it is Boba Fett, and there's some things that maybe make you think that it's not Boba Fett, and we'll break those down here in just a minute here.
Okay.
So anyways, let's see, where were we? Oh, so he wants to get in the guild, and he's thinking, okay, I've got to, she basically convinces him that, hey, don't go after Child. You've got somebody like Mandalorian. If you really want to get in the guild, why don't we team up and we'll get, Mando, you'll get what you want. I'll get what I want, and then, excuse me, the reality is he decides he's going to go ahead and shoot her, kill her, leave her for dead. And then he's got in his head, again, thinking bigger. He's really going for like all in on this stuff. He's going to go ahead and just go back to the Child, take the Child, use that as ransom, turn in Mando, and life's going to be great. He's going to be a part of this guild and all that, of course. So he kills her. Legendary, right? He leaves, and Mando shows up, realizes there's something that's horribly gone wrong here. Eventually makes his way back to Tatooine, and it's there that they kind of have the little quick holdout, and Mando kills him and takes the baby, and they get the hell out of Dodge, right?
Right.
That's kind of how it ends. And I know I kind of whipped through this, but I know we were down to I wanted to keep this under an hour or so. But any thoughts around that before we get into like the really big thing? Because all that seems it all leads up to the big moment at the very end. I definitely want to leave some time to talk about that. Yeah,
I know. I think you can kind of race through it because that's really what it was. It was actually fairly straightforward. I think the dialogue, was pretty good. At least the manipulation aspect of it, I thought could have been a little bit tighter, I guess. But the whole legendary thing kind of get stuck. But again, it goes to the ego of this kid and what he thinks he's actually capable of doing. And because he's figured this thing out now, he thinks he's a badass and can just do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Now, if it were me, and I was thinking like that,
yeah, this is
why not just take the kid and go? Why not just take the kid and jet and take care of it that way? Then maybe the Mandalorian's after him all the time, but Mandalorian might not care at that point. he'll go after the kid, not necessarily the Toro.
Yeah.
Once he makes the delivery. But anyway,
yeah,
it's not like the Mandalorian has a way off planet.
Right. I think with the child, he gets into the guild. No questions, right? He gets into the guild. He was able to get the child, whether the Mandalorian lived or not, he was able to get the child. There's definitely a huge bounty for that. He gets into the guild.
Right.
But he doesn't want to get just in the guild. He wants to be legendary. And the only way he's going to be legendary is to do something this legendary, right? Is taking out somebody that's this wanted, in addition to bringing in the child. And I think that's where he's just getting too greedy. He's thinking way too big here, way in his overhead. He was way in and over his head to begin with. And but yeah, I think that's kind of why he decided to go this route. And it speaks to, again, his lack of common sense or maturity. I don't think he's not thinking right. And he's not Jonesy. If Jonesy had been doing this, we would have had a different outcome. All right, let's get into the last piece. And this is the little scene at the very end. It's very quick. I think all of about 7 seconds, if you actually time it, maybe even less. I don't know. But we get this figure that's in black, and he walks up there. He leans over Fennec's body, and pretty much that's the end of the scene. Now, there are a couple things that give us clues as to who this potential person can be. And again, I'm going to plug this. It's episode 325. I looked it up while Jonesy was talking. Episode 325 is the Cobb Vanth, the Mandalorian episode. There, if you want a lot more of this, like an entire episode, or how long is that episode? Yeah, 1 hour and 4 minutes of Mike and I talking about this. Go listen to that. But
if you want to subject yourself to Mike, go for
if you want to subject yourself to 1 hour of Mike, no, I'm kidding. He did a really good job on that episode. But if you want to, so let's talk about the visual and the audible clues that are in here.
Yeah.
So we've got the Spurs, right? The first and foremost, the Spurs is what everybody was talking about. There's only two characters that we know of, at least in the what we've seen on TV, whether it be TV or film, that have worn spurs, and that is Boba Fett and Cad Bane. All right, those are the only two. So it's one of those two based on that, if that is indeed what it is. The other thing is the cape, right? He's got like this black cape going on, and when we first, like the very first episode, when we first watched this, I think we came back and we were like, oh, this is going to be Gideon. It's going to be Moff Gideon, no questions answered. Well, there really wasn't anything that would lead us to think that it turned out to be Moff Gideon at the end. It could still very well be him, but it begs a lot of questions.
Right.
All right. 2, and next thing, the character that's walking has one of the fobs. He's got a tracking fob. So if it is somebody like Boba Fett, then you have to ask, okay, so did he have this tracking fob because he was tracking her down? Why would she be meeting him, right? Why would she be meeting Boba Fett if he was looking for her? Maybe Boba Fett, it's still Boba Fett, and he got this tracking fob from somebody else. But whoever had it, that's how they found Fennec Shan. They were using that tracking device to find Fennec Shan. So it seems like it would be somebody that had a bounty out for her specifically.
Right.
Maybe not. And I don't. So let me just pause there. But give me your thoughts on all that, and then certainly your thoughts on who potentially this could be and why.
Well, I think you're right. The fob was for her. And I hope it was for her, and this isn't sloppiness, but to me, it seems like it's for her. I mean, clearly there's something out there for her already. But I think when I think about the characters I want to see that kind of are in the space of bounty hunting and that we've seen on screen that are cool, I'm going to kind of set Boba aside. So I don't know how I feel about that.
Okay.
But Cad Bane is definitely one of them. And for me, it's like Embo. Embo is always really, really cool as well.
Yeah, he's a cool looking character. Yeah,
I mean, the hat and everything is really neat. But Cad Bane is really a fun one. And I wish it would make a lot of sense for those characters, because Dave Filoni was so direct in their creation and their involvement, and even some of their arcs over time. If you want to give it, I mean, that's a bit loose in the interpretation of the word, but I like those characters coming into it. Now, granted, I don't know. Why would Boba still, I mean, is Boba still alive? We don't know. Who would be wearing spurs? Are spurs really that uncommon? I don't know. Maybe if you're out on the desert, that makes a lot of sense, because you need a spur dewback, right? Presumably.
That's why you wear them. Yes.
That's why, that's the point of spurs in the first place. In Texas, we know what spurs are for. So I'm sorry, if you live somewhere in the North or the Midwest, or where you do a lot of corn and stuff, we love you, but that's what spurs are for.
Yeah.
But that was really mean. I apologize.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. I'm laughing because you got two Texas boys talking about spurs, but go on.
Well, you're from Michigan. I don't think you kind of.
Hey, come on now. I'm like half and half. I was.
You got here as fast
Michigan,
as you could.
I got here as fast as I could. Yeah, never looked back.
Right. So I don't. It's hard to put a lot of stock in the Spurs, because it kind of makes sense. And I think it's a fun Easter egg for them to really do. And the visual, I mean, the audio is definitely there. Would it be cool if it was like a Boba? Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm still lukewarm about that whole thing of, I don't want to muddy the waters with Mandalorians. Now, if it was Boba without a helmet, maybe. The more I think about that one, the more I get more interested about that he's taken off the helmet. He's not living the lifestyle anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he just is. And we actually see him.
Yeah.
So he's not a detraction from Din Djarin.
Right.
Well, we don't know his name yet, but that's his name.
Yeah.
I feel bad keep calling him Mandalorian. We know his name, but we don't ever use it.
Nah. It's Mando.
Yeah.
Mando.
Just Mando.
And Baby Yoda.
Anyway, so if Boba comes back into play, that's kind of how I would like to see Boba. I would like to see him completely out of the game and no helmet.
Right.
And then that kind of be the symbolism of him not being in the Mandos, or nothing to do with them anymore for whatever reason.
Yep.
Maybe he settled down with Cammy.
Oh, Cammy. I think we actually talked about her in one episode at one point.
We've talked about her a couple times.
Yeah, I don't know why she keeps coming back up, but yeah, we.
She was in the book, Last Jedi book. Yeah.
So
anyway, continue, my friend.
There's all right. So that's all. I think everything's on the table at this point. I don't think there's anything that's off the table for it. Who knows with, what Dave Filoni has in plan, and certainly with Jon Favreau and where they want to take the story and how this plays into. And this is all stuff we talk about in that episode. And I don't want to keep plugging it, but we do talk about all the possibilities, whether it's Cad Bane, Boba Fett, a nobody, right? Somebody that's just neutral, has really that we've never seen before. We talk about the pros and cons of all of those. We talk about the reasons why they would be relevant and why they would come back and how that plays into the overall arching story that we think the Mandalorian is going at some point. All of that is in that episode. So go listen to that for a lot more information there. And again, like Dale said, we could be all wrong and laughing at how stupid we were on episode 339. So got that to look forward to. Can't wait.
So overall, where does this episode rank for you amidst the other four that we've seen so far?
I mean, it's probably I would say it's, there's if it wasn't for this last scene for me makes up in dividends, and because it just, especially given that we don't touch on it again the rest of the season. Like it is it's true stuff that I really love and enjoy. You throw something in there, you get everybody talking about it, and then you don't come back to it for a while. This is the J.J. Abrams recipe for Lost, although it was in spades in that show. But I like that. I like the fact that they're putting this stuff in there, and you could argue that like the people in the sequel trilogy, the writers respectively, did a lot of this stuff and then never came back and did the payoff for it.
Right.
But I don't get that impression with Dave Filoni. Now, whether it happens or not, he's got a plan. He's always had a plan. You look at Clone Wars, you look at Rebels. There are definite things that he put in there, and I'm not gonna say it was 100%, but the really big items, the big boulder items that he teased you with, he came back and revisited them. It maybe took a lot longer than he wanted to, but he had a vision, he had a plan, and that's what excites me, is that this means something. There is some relevance here, some significance to it. And I'm more interested in not only just the payoff, but I'm also interested in how the rest of the story builds upon that, right? This has, whatever this is, whoever this person is, whatever the outcome of these two people meeting up and all of that is going to have repercussions, downstream impacts, upstream impacts, whatever. All of this is going to impact the overall story for The Mandalorian. I have no doubt in my mind that that's going to happen. And that's what excites me most about it. So to answer your question, had this scene not been in there, I would have definitely ranked it as the lower one. I still think it's probably the lowest of the first four that we've seen, the first five. I don't think it's probably my least favorite of it. Again, it's Star Wars, so I'm not sitting there and saying it sucks and I hate it, but it's probably lower there. I think it gets more points for me personally because of that last scene.
That's so funny that 7 seconds out of, I think this is one of the shortest, I think this is the shortest episode so far as well. It was like only 35 minutes. I think,
maybe.
like
yeah, I have to look, but yeah, maybe.
I don't know what the percentages are on this, Albert, but 7 seconds out of 35 minutes completely changes your view of the episode is really interesting to me. We need to do a character dissection of Albert and Padilla.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Right. We're going to bring Mike in. He's going to mispronounce your name 1,000 times. It's going to be great. You don't even know. So
can't wait.
I'm kind of with you. This has to be the lowest of the episodes. It didn't have really as much, again, until the last scene, there really wasn't much new development here, I guess. I mean, and maybe some of the comments about him being more of a dad, which I don't know. I didn't get that impression all that well. But So it's at the bottom. And I know we had a couple of folks that were saying that in the chat as well. And I think generally it is the weakest one. But the problem I have with it again is it's not so much that the story was necessarily weak. It was just some of the writing, some of the dialogue was a little off for me. Some of the visuals were a little off. The whole episode just seemed off. There were good moments to it. No problem with that. Overall, it was okay. But it just wasn't as well put together as all the episodes were, all the other, the previous 4. And I think that's the part that I just have more of a problem with than anything else. Of like the story they told, I thought was okay. I love Ming-Na Wen. She's amazing. And I was really disappointed she died though. So I was really hoping that was Agent Coulson and we were going to go to Tahiti.
Well, I don't know if she died. Like we didn't really touch on that. No.
She dead, Jim. Well, all right. So let's ask this then. Does she come back to life?
I don't think she comes. Well, does she return in Does she return in season 2? Yes.
Is she still alive?
Yes. That's my take. Again, we talk about it in 329 as well, but I think she's still alive. I don't think she was left for dead. I mean, she was. Wait, back up. She was shot. She was supposed to be killed. She was literally left for dead. But I think she comes back in season 2. I don't think you bring in somebody like Ming-Na Wen, give her a couple lines, and then not do something with her later on. I think she's a good character to have around.
And I think that's the only part that I can really get around is why do you bring in someone who has really she's been really good in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Of course, she's got a storied history with Disney.
Yeah.
Why do you have someone who has a bigger name and then really just give them 10 minutes of screen time, something like that, and kind of throw the character away?
Yeah.
I would really hope that some way that she does come back. She looked pretty dead to me and she wasn't moving, but there's always ways to explain that away.
Right.
So I hope she comes back. I kind of have a problem if she comes back, but I still want her to come back. I'm a very complicated person. So
I think we've learned
I'm just happy to make you laugh so much today.
We've learned more about Jonesy and Albert on this episode than we have about The Mandalorian. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, hey, welcome to self-reflection with the Cantina.
Yeah, right. We're going through some tough times. The other quickly, there was an R2D5 reference. We didn't really talk about it because we're out of time. Beggar's Canyon, Womp Rat. I mean, it's just littered with all these Easter eggs. And so if you like Easter eggs and you like looking for this stuff, this episode has a ton of stuff for you to look at.
Right.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode. We're not going to close your set. I've got a couple things. One, I want to thank We Edit Podcasts on Twitter. They did an article about I don't know if it was top 10 Star Wars podcasts that are out there. And I don't think these were ranked in any particular order. They had us at number 3, which was really awesome. So thank you guys I know she said she listened, I forget her name now. I meant to write it down. I didn't. But thank you for the nice words and for listening to the show and kind of ranking us up there with a lot of great other Star Wars podcasts. So
yeah, and definitely check out the other shows that were on there. There really are some good ones. So thank you very much for that.
Yep. And then lastly, we got a 5-star review from, who was this here? J Prince 91. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And this is over from the UK. So thanks to all involved in the Cantina Cast for making a thoroughly entertaining listen during the lockdown. I finally had the chance to watch the Clone Wars and Rebels right the way through. That's a British thing, not so. It's reignited my love of Star Wars, and listening to some of your back episodes to get your takes on how all of this made it even more interesting. Keep up the great work, Jonathan Yorkshire in the UK. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for the review. Definitely appreciate that. And before we get out of here, again, if you guys want to subscribe to the podcast, please do so. We're on all of the podcast catchers, and I think Mike was submitting this to Amazon podcast. I didn't know that was a thing now.
Yeah, Amazon Music is now doing podcasts. Yeah.
So we'll be on there as well eventually, probably here very shortly. So you can catch us on all those. And then certainly if you guys enjoyed the live show, we love interacting with you. You guys have a lot of great comments, a lot of great questions, things that we didn't even think about. It's always fun to read those in real time. I want to thank everybody that came out and joined us live. I didn't get a chance to obviously acknowledge everyone, but there were a ton of people in there. And some folks I know are like in another country and have stayed up way past their bedtime just to be able to watch just the beginning of the show. So that means a whole lot to us that you guys are doing that. So please subscribe to this on YouTube so you don't miss any future episodes, or on Facebook Live. And then we're also on Twitch TV, which we're doing if you get your streaming content through Twitch. So
yeah, most of the commenters seem to be on YouTube. So if you're figuring out which one you'd prefer to be, the most activity appears to be on YouTube, so you can interact with other folks. It's a lot of fun. They seem to have a pretty good time interacting with each other as well. So thanks for all the activity, everyone.
Yeah. And Dylan Brown and Music Train, I think these are the first time you guys came and watched this live. So I just want to call you guys out for doing that. So thank you, both of you. All right, well, that's going to do it. We'll be back for episode 340. It'll probably be later this week. If not, we'll be back on Tuesday to talk about more Mandalorian. Hopefully, we get a trailer out before then. I'm not saying we will, but if we do, we'll try to get something up almost immediately once that breaks, so we can break all of that down for you as well. So any final thoughts, any final words before we get out of here?
No, let's get out of here, you little womp rat.
Oh, jeez. It was an easy one.
Dude, tell me, but some of it was bad.
Okay, we'll see you guys next week and talk more Mandalorian.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.